Connected in 3D, Real-Time Solutions and Digital Twins podcast with your host, Ashley Crowder.
Hi, welcome to Connected in 3D, Real-Time Solutions and Digital Twins. I'm your host, Ashley Crowder, co-founder of Ventana, and we're here to talk about different use cases and case studies of XR and 3D digital twin technology that is really improving business. And I'm so excited today to have Paul Davies, Technical Fellow, Immersive Technologies at Boeing. Paul's leading the team researching and developing the company's augmented reality platform for manufacturing applications, and is currently working on implementation of the technology on production programs across the commercial, defense, and services side of Boeing's business. So, Paul, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ashley.
Yeah. So let's start out. Share a bit about your journey at Boeing and how you became the leader of the team driving augmented reality adoption for manufacturing.
Yeah, sure. So it's been quite a journey, actually, going back to, well, I started with the company in 2003 as an intern. My work in the AR, XR space started in around 2006, 2007. And I was just fortunate enough to get connected with another technical fellow back in the day who was investigating sort of use cases of AR. This was before any of it was sort of really practical or feasible. It was more concept based. And so we were exploring how it could affect Boeing's business, how it can impact things that Boeing is doing, manufacturing and other things. Put together some concepts, and then I just really got hooked on the technology, to be honest with you. I just knew, instinctively that it was going to be a game changer in so many ways, connecting people with digital data through 3D immersive views of it. And since then, I just made it my focus. And I've been working on it in this space for the past, 18 years. So.
That's awesome. You beat me. I've been 12. That's amazing. And so, it's so great that, Boeing had this ability for this early R&D. But how did Boeing first start exploring AR for manufacturing? Like what sparked some of that initial investment in the technology?
So our first sort of exploration use cases were in actually our El Segundo factory, locally to you and I here in Southern California. That's our satellite factory. And, some of the satellite programs are, low rate, comparatively speaking, to airplanes, and very high value, tens, hundreds of millions, sometimes, even into the billions of dollars, for satellites. So we sort of picked up on that and realized, well, we need to do everything we can to prevent mistakes, get everything right the first time, help people building the satellite understand the designs. So we started exploring use cases for implementing augmented reality to show the correct location of parts, waveguides, and other parts on satellites. And again, this was back in 2006, 2008. No HoloLens, no headset was really viable. So we actually put a lot of investment into, it was tablet based, and we installed motion capture systems in work cells to track the tablet and provide these, views, correct locations of parts on a tablet screen. So that's sort of how we got started.
Wow, that's awesome. And tablets are still, a great initial use case of that. But I guess it was enough. You saw enough benefit for the company to continue investing and build the use case as the tech got better.
Yes. At the very beginning, we probably invested more than we gained. But of course, working in the research group, that's what research is about, right? It's about developing for the future. So I think everyone understood the potential of where it could go. Obviously, we couldn't, outfit all of our factories with motion capture systems, right? That's just not going to be feasible. But the concept was everyone understood what it meant to take this 3D design and register it spatially to the product, what that meant for the person viewing that scene. And yes, that was enough for us to continue investment. Yeah.
That's great. And I also think it's important you were starting at this like very high value product, because often what we see is places where XR is extremely valuable is a process that's maybe not done as often. It's extremely high value and or extremely dangerous. So, that's a good use case.
Yeah.
One of your more recent use cases was with the Tanker 767 wiring installation, where you saw incredible improvements with AR, like reducing time by 20% and defects by 80%. So tell me Tell me a bit more about that project and how that all came together.
Sure, yeah. So that was when the HoloLens 1 was first released, 2016-ish. We set to develop a pipeline to import electrical wiring models into an AR scene. So that was actually the very first beginning of what we now call BARC, the Boeing Augmented Reality Kit. That was our first sort of use case. Essentially we built this data translation pipeline that would pull geometry from CATIA, which is where models for that program developed. Bunch of other electrical metadata, combined all that into one lightweight geometry model, and then we would basically, through several steps of BARC, import it into an AR scene and deliver it over our network to HoloLens 1. We completed over 2,000 hours worth of usage of the HoloLens on the shop floor in the factory. 10 to 15 electricians used the tool, and then we collected a lot of data in terms of if you view these wiring installation models in an AR scene as opposed to a paper drawing or some other method, what it meant in terms of time savings and quality, as you mentioned, and we saw some really good results.
That's great. And I know when we chatted before, this was a really important use case because it was tied to the CEO, the C-suite's initiatives. Like this was from what I remember, a problem project. It was, the production was behind. If you can talk a little bit about how you chose this use case and it really impacted, the KPIs for the business and how that helped you kind of continue expanding BARC.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, electrical design on the tanker is extremely complex. It's one of the most complicated airplanes we build. And the program were having, some difficulty in conveying the correct configuration to the people building the airplane through drawings. And the chief engineer at the time for systems installation, actually Linda Hapgood, she's a big supporter of our work. She called me and asked me to sort of look at different solutions. And so we put this together. Actually, we played a small part in enabling the first flight of the aircraft back in the day. And yeah, as you mentioned, the C-suite, is really cool. We actually got the CEO of Boeing, had heard of the work, was really spent an hour with us, came to look at it, got some demos. That was really, really cool. And actually, Boeing actually sort of ran with it and put our work on the Boeing.com homepage for 3 days.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. But yeah, I mean, the question I get a lot, from different stakeholders and enterprises is like, how do we get budget for these things? How do we do it? And it's like, it's solving core problems of the business that are, goals of multiple groups in the company, because then, it quickly proves the value, which is why, this project was so great.
Yeah.
What are some of the, most impactful AR applications you've implemented across Boeing? This was obviously one, but I don't know if you have others you want to chat about.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, honestly, sometimes the most impactful are the simplest, as in technically. We have a lot of use cases for just showing the location of something. And it might just be a hole, even where showing holes that are pre-drilled that have to be inspected. Very simple, just import XYZ locations, just show a little icon at the location. And, when you're looking at, 500 holes on the surface of a wing, it's very, easy for the inspector to find the right hole when he, sees an icon pointing at it, as opposed to, trying to count from the end or something like that. Those are actually probably our most common use cases. Checking holes, displaying fastener grip lengths, verifying assemblies, just showing simple geometry of parts where they should be, brackets or something, just allowing a person to look through an AR scene and see the correct configuration of, say, 500 brackets. Just pretty basic use cases. The challenge is, with all the different configurations of aircraft, how do we get the correct geometry, say, for that exact aircraft in a scalable, automated way? That's the challenge.
Well, that's why we started Ventana. But it is because when you're talking about how you, especially those first use cases, bringing in CATIA files, getting them to be low poly enough to work on the HoloLens and prepping those files, it's a lot of manual work at first. And so, one of those challenges that, we really go about solving is automating that content uh, optimization publishing piece. But yeah, that's, it kind of leads me into my next question. So that's one of the scaling challenges. What are some of the biggest roadblocks you've seen to widespread adoption of this technology in Boeing?
How long have we got?
Yeah.
Quite so. We've had some successes, but of course we haven't. Our usage is still sort of points. Not I wouldn't say point solutions, but isolated to certain use cases and certain programs. Some of the biggest challenges we see, roadblocks, I'll say, we've had a lot of trouble integrating these devices into our IT systems, in terms of authenticating users, getting data to the device. How do we control, data maybe sitting on mobile devices? Of course, we've got MDM, but with the HoloLens, we've had, challenges integrating that to the MDM systems that we use. We've sort of gotten around some of those, never really fully flushed out. We've got some workarounds in some areas, so that's been a big challenge. And then, I'm not going to say anything new here, but the adoption of the headsets is a problem in manufacturing environments. Obviously, that's too big, uncomfortable, not practical in some cases. If you're in a 737, if you're in the cargo area, you can't even stand up. It's too not tall enough. So you're sort of crawling around, and it's you're already uncomfortable, and it's hot, and and then you've got this headset on, and just it doesn't take much for a person to say that's not going to work. So in some cases we've avoided those, but those things have limited our sort of replication, I'll say.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, very excited for when Orion glasses become actually available. So, I know I spoke with Qualcomm at CES on a panel, and we were talking about, all the work they're doing to help make chips, more efficient and better so hardware can get smaller. But that brings up like another challenge that's coming up is, the HoloLens is getting sunset. So I'm assuming you guys are starting to look at what are you going to replace it with? And hopefully there is something that's not as bulky.
We're hoping, but we've invested a lot in this space, but we're certainly not in the hardware, AR hardware. That's not our space. So we're really relying on the market, the vendors, providers here. I think we've got a little bit of time left with the HoloLens. In my understanding, Microsoft have a little bit of support left for a certain amount of time, and then they're going to sunset the whole thing. So I've heard rumblings, as you said, Orion, Samsung, Sony just came out with a new VR, those things. In the meantime, we've sort of, I wouldn't say refocused, but we've definitely added the ability to go back to tablets. Actually, it's interesting. We started with tablets. Now we're sort of going back to tablets, much more stable hardware environments. And it won't work for all use cases, but our approach has been to become less dependent on one piece of hardware and try to support whatever is available, this year, next, whatever is the flavor of the month sort of thing.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And that's one of the things, when we went about building our platform, we're like, well, just being able to visualize 3D on a desktop is helpful, but we want it to be on any device. So desktop, mobile, and headset, so that you can leverage that technology on any device that someone feels comfortable with. Because to your point, that adoption, you can build the best experience, but if somebody doesn't want to use it, can sit on the shelf. And that, platform independence is key. I know we had chatted, you're moving towards that with Unity XR Interaction Toolkit. And can you talk a little bit about what that is and how you're utilizing it?
Sure. Essentially our first version of Bark was using the Microsoft Mixed Reality Toolkit, MRTK. So that sort of ties you into a HoloLens. You're sort of dependent on that device. And that, that was fine for a couple of years, but then we realized, as you said, we want to be platform agnostic. One use case might lend itself to a phone. Another person may prefer a hands-free headset, and we just don't want to dictate to the user really what device they should be using. And so our vision is you can take a particular work instruction or IP or installation plan or whatever, we call it building the job in the Bark world. We would build the job, and then that job can be viewed on whatever device the user chooses. So to do that, we use the Unity XRI, which sort of abstracts some of the device specific functionality like gestures and other things, and allows you to deploy your device to tablets and headsets. It's not, I've grossly oversimplified that. There's a lot of nuances. Certain devices have controllers, some don't, some do gestures, some have whatever. So that we're actually doing some work now on investigating what those dependencies are for all the devices we know, and how do we best account for, touch screens versus using gestures, and can we deploy a single code base to everything, all the devices? That's sort of one thing we're looking at now. But again, our goal is to get away from being dependent on any single piece of hardware.
Yeah, which I think is really smart. And yeah, that it is complex, but going with Unity or Unreal, those are kind of the two main game engines I definitely think makes the most sense. And then, of course, everyone's wondering about AI. How are you all thinking about AI tool sets within these applications?
Well, I think there's definitely a role for AI technology in like inspection use cases, and object detection, object recognition. You're trying to determine if an assembly is correct, built correctly, has all the parts in the right place. So we've got some ideas around there. Got some early work in that space, but I think there's I don't think we've realized we haven't fully realized just the simple use case of an AR scene showing a design model. There's huge amounts of value that we could gain that we, for one reason or another, have not realized yet. But as you mentioned, we've also got these ideas about advancing to more complex systems using AI for object detection. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I was really excited. I know I don't think you guys are a Siemens shop, but Siemens at CES announced their AI copilot to help automate the 3D model creation more. And I see that, like, that 3D model creation piece, automation, being extremely helpful for this, right? Because to your point, getting all those 3D assets in the right formats and the right size and everything you need, I think could help aid it a bit better.
Yeah, our defense side actually is a Siemens-based shop. Okay. And I actually hadn't heard of that, so
I'll send you a link. Yeah, they announced a lot of stuff at CES. That's Great. Exciting with AR, and they've really bet on spatial computing, metaverse, whatever you want to call it, because they see the value like Boeing has, right? Like you're saving time, you're helping people build more accurate parts. But yeah, so once the cross-team collaboration aspect is so important. So like, how did you approach collaboration, for a massive and diverse organization and get that buy-in? Because, I can only imagine what it takes to get sign-off at Boeing for something,
Yeah. Well, honestly, we still struggle with that. Boeing, other large companies, we do sort of struggle with, there's a lot of people wanting to work in this really cool space, and so getting alignment in, sort of who's doing what, and then getting the leadership sort of bought into, okay, Bark's doing this, it's doing it. I think the key there is proving the value, capturing the data like we did for the tanker example. Once groups and leaders see that sort of thing, it's, you don't sort of have to sell too much. It just becomes everyone wants what this technology can do. It's a matter of communicating efficiently what it can do, and I think once that happens, we've never had a problem with sort of getting leadership buy-in. And we've been sort of consistently investing in this space for, as I mentioned earlier, many years. So
yeah, which is great. And then for the actual, installers using the tech, was it just getting them to try the headset once, or how are you doing like that side of training and implementation?
Yeah, so we learned actually early on we need to give the users a little playtime with the devices before we ask them to use it in actual work. So typically what we'll do is, if a new group, just half an hour, if it's a HoloLens, open a web browser, go to your favorite website, do whatever, play with it, get used to the gestures. And then we have some training courses in our online internal sort of training system where they would go and take 2 courses, one on how to build the jobs on the back end, and then one how to view them on the mobile app. So it's sort of 3 parts: familiarization with the device, how do you control it, how to use the back end, and how to use the front end of Bark. And those are sort of the main things we do. And we learned that early. Without that sort of familiarization session, it's too much too soon. You're asking someone to use an app they don't know how to use with gestures they've never done before, and the whole thing is new, and it can easily go south. They just is like, no, not for me. So
that's really good advice, because it'd be like someone who's never worked on a laptop before.
Yeah.
And it's like, I love that. Like, go to your favorite website, click around.
Yeah.
That's really good advice. And so that kind of leads me into you guys have been doing this for 20 years, continuing to expand more. What do you see as the key steps to move this to full scale adoption? How can infrastructure, security, and device readiness evolve? I know you touched on the MDM. So that device management system you guys currently have isn't really built for XR. You're trying to make it work. Maybe they just need to buy one of the XR MDM companies that are out there, make it simple. But yeah, like how do you see these next steps over the next 1 to 5 years?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, the things I mentioned earlier with limiting adoption, right? We've got to tackle those. And as you said, the MDM IT infrastructure is a piece of it. The smaller, more usable hardware is a piece of it. But I think what would help all of that is a stabilization. I'm not sure stabilization is the right word. Less volatility, say, in the hardware, AR hardware, and even to some extent software landscape, because everyone's a little bit hesitant to put too much resources in any one space, whether it be if you're using Unity, in XRI, or you're developing for Imagine or HoloLens or whatever. Everyone has seen so much change over the past, say, 5-10 years. It makes everyone nervous, right? So I think more stability in the landscape would really help us say, okay, this is the direction everyone's going, so let's go that way. And I don't see that at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's why I keep talking about CES, but it's all the big announcements, right?
Yeah.
So, I think with Google announcing Android XR in partnership with a few companies, I think that's a big step forward. And look, it's new. There's a lot to do. You'd have to rebuild for Android XR. Who knows? They should do a partnership with Unity, but then it becomes, XR starts to look more like our mobile devices. You've got Android and iOS, and they're always going to be different. But I think that's a step forward, at least, because then, say, the HoloLens disappears, another one, but as long as these devices run on Android XR, it'd be the same operating system, just like if you had a Dell or IBM laptop. But there's some ways to go for that. So to your point, and at least, Unity and Unreal Engine, either one, both game engines work across many different devices. So that should definitely help. But that's a good point. And then, what advice do you have for manufacturers who are just starting out their journey with AR and digital twins? Looking back, what would you tell them to do? What would you do differently?
I would say leverage, resources that are out there. There's a lot of consortiums. There's a lot of other people who are interested in advancing the ecosystem, like myself. We're a member of the AREA, the Augmented Reality Enterprise Alliance. That's a great group of like-minded companies who are all looking to solve these challenges together in ways where you don't compete with each other. So a lot of resources there, a lot of webinars, educational resources out there for those kind of things. And then when you get to the point of actually, you're ready to try and implement something, I would say start small and be very successful at a small thing. We use the term "don't boil the ocean," right? Everyone's heard that before.
Yeah.
Pick a use case where there is a known problem. A lot of people know about the problem, and don't make it too big, and solve it really well. Communicate that fix, and then I think, in my experience, what you'll find is the leadership then say, okay, well, I want this now over here, and then it starts to grow organically. That's been my experience of how to get started.
That's great advice. And which you've already iterated, make sure you're not tied to one specific ecosystem for sure.
Yeah, you've got to be flexible. We fell into that trap with the first HoloLens, and then, well, everyone knows the history there. We had to completely redevelop everything, and so great advice. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thanks so much for joining. Where can people connect with you if they've got more questions?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we can share my email address if that's okay, or I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me just by my name with Boeing, and you can get me there. But if you like my email address, paul.r.davies@boeing.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's amazing to just hear all these incredible case studies with AR at Boeing, and I'm excited for what you all do next.
Great. Well, thank you, Ashley. I really appreciate the great conversation. It was really fun.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.